Oh, happy birthday, Dustin, someone just wrote. We should sing to Dustin. I'll sing. Happy birthday. Actually, let's all sing. Ready? Unmute yourselves. Hopefully we won't crash Zoom doing this. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear
Awesome. Yay. Okay, so let's start. It's 3 o'clock. Welcome to this fun Q&A session. I have no idea what the questions are about. I'm happy to answer kind of almost anything really. And would love to hear also discussion. So if you have the question, feel free to follow up as I continue to speak. So it has like a little more of a conversational kind of aspect to it. I see that there are 20 that have come in or 20 messages. So maybe I'll just kind of go in order, but Dustin, what would be really helpful to me is if I start like with the first one, for example, and you see others that look related, you could maybe go ahead and guide me in my answers to them, okay? Good, so the question is, what was the evolution of your goals as you developed as a musician, as far as the type of job you wanted to do from the beginning to during and after college? I love this. This is such a great question. Can you tell us about your, okay, and then there's, I think, is that 2 questions there, Juan? Sort of 2? Okay. So first of all, let me say that I was 11 years old when I started to play the flute, and I picked it because it was shiny. Like, I went to a concert and I saw a whole row of shiny things, like the lights were like glistening off it. And I was like, I don't know what that sounds like or what that is, but it's sparkly and therefore I love it and I want it. So I picked the flute. We were there to kind of pick our band instruments. And I had no idea what it sounded like until somebody gave me a James Galway record. And I just remember, I still remember this feeling. It was the Man with the Golden Flute record. Do you guys know what a record is, by the way? All right, so, you know, it was like this big and he was like on the front of it with his big beard at the time and this like gold charm that he used to wear, this heart. And it was the first record I'd ever owned that someone like bought me. It was like my record. And my parents had these speakers that were literally as big as refrigerators. At least that's what they felt like to me when I was 11. And so I put the record on and I ran up to this loft where these massive refrigerator speakers were, because we didn't have earphones or buds. There was no earbud. And I put my ear up to this massive refrigerator and I just could not get close enough to the sound. And what I remember is being like, my heart was ignited. I was like, whatever this is, because this is not how I sound when I play the shiny thing, is what I want to do and be for the rest of my life. So I was lucky in that I had a passion igniting experience. And so the first thing I thought I wanted to be was James Galway. And I think the question is really neat because, you know, we go through seasons in our life and it's normal to be like passionate about one idea, and that's almost like a stepping stone. And then it takes us to maybe a bigger awareness of what else is out there. And suddenly there are 3 other stones to choose from. So maybe we choose that stone. And if we go on that stone, then maybe there's like 3 other stones. And suddenly we're not near the first stone, but we have what's called our journey. And it's appropriate, it's age appropriate to think you want to be something and then end up somewhere else. And I just remember wondering if that was like maybe not good. Like thinking, well, maybe this isn't good because I started off wanting to be James Galway and now I want to be Nina, right? I'm just kidding about James Galway, but I wanted to like travel the world and be a soloist. And so basically the core and the seed of what drew me to that, to answer your question, Juan, has never changed. But I didn't know what it was. I just knew the picture that I had. And that picture was, I wanted to be James Galway. I wanted to be a soloist. So I started to practice and listen to records and like develop my passion. And then I learned that you could be an orchestral flutist. Well, then suddenly I wanted to be the principal flutist of like, I don't know, the Berlin Philharmonic by the time I was 21, I thought. So then I really wanted that. And then, you know, and then I had some orchestral experiences and it didn't feel as satisfying as my solo experiences. So I kind of was like, I think I'm supposed to want to be an orchestral musician, and I do, but like, I feel something else inside of me that's like calling me. And again, it was the seed. And really what, for me at the bottom of the line, if I distill it all, the seed is I've wanted to create art and I wanted to touch lives. And I didn't even think at that point about a teaching career, right? Because it wasn't really like part of that season in my life. I was like 18, 19, you know, I'm not thinking about teaching other people. Like I'm just thinking about myself and how I'm going to get good. And so then that became like the next piece. And I didn't even know you could like become a flute professor. I thought you just became a famous flutist and then you were given a flute professor job. So that was another part of the season of growth and like awareness of opportunity. So the main point in my answer is that it has changed. But what hasn't changed is really what drew me in the beginning, which was this love for this thing of beauty and a love for something that I knew was going to be really hard. And I loved the passion and the idea of like pursuit. And then touching people's lives. That became a quick third, because once I had the experience of like, wow, you can make music and sound and people can come up to you afterwards with tears in their eyes and tell you that you touched them. Like I was hooked. So from there, it's kind of branched off. So Juan, any follow up to that part of your question or anybody else? I think I sort of answered it or did, but I could go on for hours, of course. Anything else on that, Juan, or follow up? No?
I think
Yes?
along those
Anybody else?
lines,
Follow-up question?
I think along those lines, some people
Is
are
that an okay,
asking.
Dustin? Okay, so then Juan asks, can you tell us about your personal experience applying for jobs as a professor at WVU and other schools where you've taught? Okay, great question, because I think we all need to be thinking about this possibility, especially, you know, I look at my colleagues who have full-time jobs in orchestras or full-time jobs doing other things, even gigging, you know, jazz musicians. And especially with what's happened during COVID, those of us who are in a professional position as a professor have been really honestly the most lucky, because our jobs have not been threatened in the way by COVID that other people's jobs have. You know, orchestras are constantly looking for, they're always on the brink of like maybe going out because of not enough funding for the arts. I'm speaking about the United States. They're not in danger in Europe because they have 60% income tax over there, and that money goes towards putting kids through college because they don't pay for their education over there. Yay. And supporting the arts. Yay, right? But we don't do that here. So, so college teaching position is a really amazing job. Let me talk about that first, and I'll talk about the application process. So basically the way it works is when you're a college teacher, there are 3 components if you're a tenured track college professor to your job. And these are not in any given order. One component is teaching, one component is research, and one component is service. And a lot of people don't know that. Well, what is a tenure track job? A tenure track job means you're employed full-time with a salary that doesn't change. You have benefits, including like insurance and retirement. So you're on track with all of that. And if you're tenure track, there's a system of like checkpoints that you're going to make over a course of 6 years, where your work is evaluated and the environment that you're in kind of like checks to see if like you're sort of the right fit and you're really living up to what they would hope to have in someone who's going to be on their faculty. So you go through this process. And so this is back to Juan's question. What's in the process? How does that work? Well, they're evaluating you on service, teaching, and research, which in the arts and music, particularly in our version, is recordings, performances, writing books, any kind of what's called creative research. So that is what the application is all about. And this is why in our studio, I'm always emphasizing all of these aspects of building your portfolio, because right from the start, you have to be like showing that you have a history of entrepreneurship, that you have a social media presence, that you are going to be a good recruiter eventually, that you're visible, that flutists know you exist, because the school wants to hire someone who's going to pull in people for their ensembles and for their program and be great for their program. So as you create your resumes and as you build and develop your pre-professional portfolios, which is what we're always talking about here, those are the elements. Commissioning new music, performances, competitions, whatever it might be for where you're at now, that gets developed. And then when you go to apply for a job, the jobs are listed, they have to be listed nationally or even internationally, I think in some cases. And then it's a cover letter, your resume, and a recording. And that's why we emphasize recording here all the time too. And having like something you can fall back on to like pull and put into an application process. And the experience of teaching is huge. Like if you do not have any college teaching experience and you can't plug that in your cover letter or answer that little question in the little questionnaire thing before you actually hit submit, you won't even be considered unless we're talking about a eeny meeny first stepping stone school. And again, that's why you guys are all teaching each other and why all the grad students are teaching. So it's really important if you are considering grad school to go somewhere where you have the opportunity to teach so that you can say, I have done college level teaching. After that, you go through a series, a committee will review all the applicants and it gets whittled down to like maybe 10 or 8 people. And then comes the next step, which is used to be just an interview over the phone. And you get interviewed by the committee, by the director, and by the dean, usually, sometimes not the dean. And then it's whittled down to 3 or 4 or 2, depending on the college's budget, because it used to be, and it probably still is, that then you get flown in and you give a master class, you give a concert, you have a meeting with the students, and you do a series of interviews and discussion, and maybe if there's a quintet, you play with the quintet. And from there, they decide who they want, and you are then plugged into place. I'm sure there must be some questions about that. Any follow-up to that? That's a really important topic. None.
How influential would you say is...
I can't hear you, Juan. Are you talking?
Oh. Can you hear me now?
Oh, no. This is something.
Are you able to hear me now? Okay. How influential would you say is the portion where the students are like kind of evaluating which teacher they prefer, as far as that, and also the committee of teachers?
So honestly, as like disappointing as this might be, it's really not. What the students think is really not that important, because they're going to be graduated in a year or two, and they may have like, let's say they love their flute or their trombone teacher and they're just devastated to hear that they've retired or they're leaving. Like they're not really the reason, they're not who the faculty are going to be listening to. But in terms of the committee, the faculty who are on that committee, which it's usually like 5 or 6 people, that is very influential, because that committee gives a recommendation then to the dean and the director gives a recommendation to the dean, and then in the end, the dean decides. Okay, any other follow-up questions?
In terms of standing out among the pool, what recommendations would you have there to kind of expand upon what you've already talked about in that sense?
Did you say standing out among the pool of applicants?
Yes.
Okay, you want to absolutely excel at everything, because the pool of applicants, especially in the flute world, is so crazy. Hold on, I can't seem to get my Zoom. Okay. It's so amazing. Flute players are amazing people. I don't know if you've discovered that even among your own colleagues, but like for whatever reason, they're hard workers. They're, they're aware of the social platforms. They're getting it. They're commissioning new music. I mean, our instrument is like the king instrument for new music commissioning. So you're going to be up against people potentially who, or let's put it this way. Here's what you want, Jacob. You want to be the most versatile, most virtuosic, most comprehensive artist, entrepreneur, teacher, publisher, anything you can get your hands on. That's who you need to be to get yourself in the final three. And you need to have a good personality, and have people who can vouch for that, because if they hear that you're hard to work with, they're not going to pull you in no matter how great you are. So in order to expand even further on what I suggested, new music commissioning, the ability to play all genres of music. If you can get on stage in that 30-minute recital that you have to give for the students and the committee and all the people, and you're not just playing Bach and Mozart, you're actually showing that you can play everything and therefore teach everything and excel and be a virtuosic at all those levels, and that you have a history of commissioning and world premieres and performances on big stages, and that you've recorded and on and on and on and on, then you're going to be in that top level of group. Okay, all right, let's move to another question. How do you balance flute and other interests, academic and personal? How do you create a cohesive program for a hybrid arts event? Okay. And then Dustin, from here on, I'm going to let you kind of look through all the questions and sort of organize them by importance, perhaps. Okay, so balancing flute and other interests is another great question. And during pandemic, when I was running the Q&A series on Facebook, I honestly think that I got like 60 of those questions, which I thought was really interesting, because I think it indicates that people struggle with that. So let's go through the seasons in life once more. When I was younger in high school and in junior high, and I knew I wanted to be James Galway, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I just knew I was supposed to get better and practice. And then I had school and I had all the things I was supposed to do. And, so I just did the best I could to just kind of practice. And then I hit college, and suddenly I had all this time. Like I had time to practice, and I had Wednesdays with lower classes than Tuesdays. And it wasn't like high school where I was like locked into all of my whole day was defined by classes. So then I kind of came into this period of like, well, how do I balance this? Do I take all of my free time and put it into practice, and or do I not? And my desire was to want to do that, because I had such a burning desire to become very good. So I think that desire is really important. But what can happen with it, if it's not tempered and recharged, just like your phones, you got to think of that desire as like a battery. It can go away. It can go away for a long time. It can go away for periods of time. So I guess the best way I would respond to this question, Jacob, is to say that we have to be in constant awareness of where our energy is, including our passion energy, our desire to create, our creative energy, our physical energy, our like emotional energy, our mental energy. First off, we have to be constantly kind of like, okay, where am I at with my phone charger with all those levels? And then we have to know what recharges those batteries. So is it a walk in the woods? Is it not practicing for 2 days? Is it, going out with friends? Is it going on a Netflix binge on a Friday night? Something like that, like what recharges? And once we know that, then the next step is, okay, well, how dedicated am I to believing this thing? And will I, what kind of program will I stick to make sure that I'm doing this? And watching my battery level and recharging and being dedicated to it. And so the question was, how do you balance it? Well, I think of a pie, And you can think of every day as a pie. Do I have a sliver of time for social? Do I have a sliver of time for being outside? Do I have a sliver of time? And how can that sliver change, like a pizza pie? How am I going to cut through that pizza today? I've got 4 hours free. Okay, great. I have a huge chunk of pie. Am I going to run the cutter this way and divide it into 4 equal parts and be like 1 hour with a friend, 1 hour, practicing, or am I going to do 3 hours practicing, 1 hour outside by myself? So it's a really hard thing, and you will not succeed at accomplishing a final way of how it's going to be because it constantly changes. Jacob, follow-up question for that, or I get the answer. Yeah, I love that question. Thank you, Sammy. I think we're all probably like, yeah, I love that question, right? So I would say, like, I just remember, and Lorna McGee talked about this too when she spoke with us, but I remember like wanting so badly to become a flute player. And in my mind, I called it making it. I wanted so badly to make it. And I was afraid that it might not happen. And I just remember this like fear being so palpable, and it drove me. And then I remember being like, well, what's driving me here? My passion, my belief, all these positive energies, or is it my fear that I'm going to like end up working in a way that I don't want to work at a restaurant or whatever it might be, and not as a flutist? And that fear, I think, was normal. Is it good? Probably not really. I think it's normal. And so looking back, I would say to myself, if you have this desire to become a tulip as a flower, and you're like, oh, I want to be like, I want to have petals like this, and I want to have a long stem, and I want this so badly, and I want to have this like shape. I really hope I can make it. I want this so badly. If it's like that inside of you, it's because guess what? You are a tulip bulb. And nothing is going to get in the way of your tulip bulb becoming a tulip. It might not have all the colors you imagine, but guess what? It's going to be even better if you live your life with integrity and you're constantly in tune with that inner voice and moving forward and taking one step after another. So looking back, I would say, don't be afraid, or be afraid, but be courageous and transmute it into energy that is more positive and will feed you and allow you to stay balanced. Because personally, I was not very balanced when I was in college. I was practicing 6 to 9 hours a day and waking up at 4 o'clock, and and I didn't go out with friends. I had like no social life. So I guess that sort of covers it. But yeah, believing in your journey, believing that if the desire is there, it's there for a reason, it's in your DNA, and it's going to manifest. Okay.
Now we have a couple of questions relating to having a private studio, including choosing models of flutes for your students, knowing when to upgrade, having policies for your students, what to charge, and how to teach different age levels. So I know that was a lot. Maybe you could pick one and just speak on that.
So I'll talk a little bit about my history here as well. So I began teaching when I was 14. I had a neighbor who had like a 8-year-old, and they were wondering if I could teach her how to play the flute. So that was my first teaching experience. And I remember teaching exactly the way I was taught. So I like set up a stand, and there was a light on the stand, and I like went to her house and I sat next to her the way like my band director would sit next to me, and he would always tap my lap and give me the beat on my lap. And I did all that because that's all I knew. And then when I moved to Germany for the Fulbright, I had some teaching opportunities, and I got my first like teaching job at a music school, not a college, but like a school where anybody could take lessons, and a community music school. And that's where I began to develop my own voice as a teacher and explore more. And then after that, I moved into starting my own studio. So I moved back to the United States, And had started a family, and I was like, all right, well, here I am, fresh off of Germany, fresh out of the Fulbright, you know, I was headed in this direction of becoming James Galway or whatever, principal flutist of something. And now my life is here. And I kind of liked it. It was like nice to take a break from all the pressure and not having to practice constantly all the time. And so I started a studio, and the way I built it was I went to the local schools in the fall during their You Pick an Instrument for Your Band program. And I played the Carnival of Venice. And when they had a show of hands, how many people want to play the flute? Like everyone in the room went like this. And the band teacher was like, I can't have 50 flute players, right? So, but basically I went and I was like, here's my love for the flute. Here's this amazing instrument. It's small. It fits in your backpack. Like, why would you not want to play this thing? And long story short, I ended up with like 15 students, just like that. And so I started my studio that way, and it's very important to have a studio policy, a contract, all of that, but I knew nothing about any of that because I didn't learn about it in college. There was no such thing as the internet. So I asked a friend who ran a successful piano studio, I'm like, so how do you like navigate, like, and what do you charge? So I think asking people around, knowing what the going rate is for your degree level, for your experience level, and in your community is really important for that. And in terms of like creating a contract and a flyer and a policy, yes, you absolutely need that. You need to run it like a business. People will pay more if you do that. They'll believe in you more. Parents like that. You're really selling yourself to the parent and not the student until the student comes in and they work with you. Then you're selling yourself to both of them, because parents will pull students out of studios. I've seen it happen. Like, I want my son to go study with this person instead. So you're running a business and you want to run it well. You want to make sure you're paying your taxes. You want to make sure you understand how self-employment tax works. And for that, you just go online and you collect policies and contracts and all kinds of things, and you create your own and you get started. Did I miss any aspect of that question, Dustin?
Yeah, that was good. Some other people, oh, can you not hear me?
No, I can hear you. I think Sammy has a follow-up question.
Yes, so when you say you already have an established studio, this is something I'm trying to navigate, where I have all of my former students like grandfathered into my old rate, but now that I've graduated and I have a higher level of study, I have new students paying a higher rate. Is there a way to navigate like increasing your rate for current students?
Yeah. Okay, that's a really great question. You have to raise your price every year. A lot of us didn't have teachers who did that, right? I don't think my teacher ever did. I think like literally my parents paid $11 an hour. But you need to do it every year, and it's something called cost of living increase. Okay, this is where entrepreneurship comes in. You guys are entrepreneurs, you're business people. You're not just flaky artists. Otherwise you'll end up like Mozart, right? He could have been so wealthy and had like the most perfect life in so many aspects if he had just been good at the business side of what he did. And money his great grandchildren would be collecting now on royalties on his music potentially, right? So yeah, you need to have a cost of living increase every year. And sometimes you have to bump it up big. Like let's say you're renting a studio space and they raise the rent on you. They're like, haha, just kidding. Your rent is not $300 a month now. It's going to be $450 because they raised the property tax in Morgantown, West Virginia. Therefore, we have to, and it just kind of goes down the line. And if, in fact, somebody was just asking me about this week, they're like, how do I bump this up? Because they just raised my rent. And I was like, you bump it up. And you explain, you know, I now have this increase, and then you can be flexible. You can say, you know, if that's a problem for you financially, me know. In some cases it won't be, in some cases it will, and then you can kind of navigate off of that. But every year I would say you should probably raise your prices a good, I don't know what the official percentage is for cost of living increase, but I think it could be like, you know, $5 or $4 or $3 a year. Okay, other follow-up questions, Dustin?
Some people also asked about.
Okay, what's a good next question?
Some people asked about teaching different ages and how you navigate that. Like, oh, you can't.
Sorry, Dustin, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh,
can you hear me now?
I can't hear
when you're
you,
mute?
Dustin.
Okay,
can everybody hear me? Raise your hand if you can hear me still. Okay, so I'm just gonna move through these questions. Okay, I like this one, so I'm gonna answer this one. How do your non-musical activities, climbing, rowing, painting, affect your flute playing and vice versa? Okay, the number one, two things, if I had to say there were like two major things. The first one is being a lifelong learner. Because if anything, I think all of those things make me a really good teacher. I was on the water this morning working with my coach on rowing, which is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And he said to me, I can tell what you're thinking about at every phase of the stroke, because he said, when you're over here and you're thinking about the finish, it looks great. And then when you go to the catch, if you're starting to think about the catch, your finish looks bad. And then you're at the catch, that looks great. And now you're coming back to the drive and your drive is looking great, but your finish and your catch look really bad. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's just like teaching the flute. You know, when you're telling a student, relax your shoulders or do something, then maybe the tone goes away. Or you're focusing on clarity of sound, but maybe a movement comes back. So I think being a lifelong learner and learning how to navigate your avatar bodies, these things that we're in, is really key. How to move on the planet. You know, biomechanics is really important. It's all about body awareness. All of it ties in. Rowing and flute playing are like the exact same thing. Same thing with climbing and swimming and any other kind of thing that you might be involved in. Art, visual art. It's so much like music. You have, you know, you're looking at the rhythm of brush strokes, you're looking at triads of color, you're looking at organizing timbres, and it's just like that in music. How are you going to design a recital? Is every piece going to be the same? Or are you going to create like a gallery of options for your listeners? So Katie, I would just basically say that they affect me as a teacher, as an artist, and I basically have come to sort of see not as many boundaries between the things that we do, but actually that there's a continuous flow. So I encourage everybody to like keep versatile because it's a great thing. Let's see, what type of historical musicological research did you do in preparation for becoming a flute professor? None, because you don't need that if it's called historical musicological. However, if you're going to be, and this is my personal answer, is none. My research is creative research. So performances on big stages, CD recordings, that's how I'd answer that for me. But if you're trying to make yourself marketable, and the first step is going to be that first college teaching job. It's going to be a tiny little job somewhere where there's like maybe 1 or 2 flute students, and they need someone to teach oral skills, which I did teach for 3 years. And, or they might need someone to teach history. That's where that, again, that versatility is going to really come in. Because you might get that job and that's your stepping stone to actually a position where maybe the only thing you do is teach flute, which I love. That's what I do. I don't teach history and flute and like oral skills or any of that anymore. Okay. Dustin, can I hear you yet still?
Yeah,
or?
can you hear me now or still no? No?
I can't hear Dustin.
Oh.
I think she might need to mute.
Okay, once more, Dustin, say something.
Dustin, you're
Muted. Yeah, I see that I'm muted
Dustin,
now.
can you unmute yourself? I think that's the problem.
Yeah, I think I unmuted myself. Can you hear me now?
Oh, I know what the problem is. Yeah, I can hear you. The problem, my sound was all the way down because when Sammy asked a question, I put my sound.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh, I think.
Hey, Dustin, what would be other questions for good next ones? Also, if you're a visitor in the room and you're not a WU Flute Studio member, please, this is for all of us, so go ahead.
So, yeah, going along with that, a visitor, I'm sorry, is it Pitos or Pitos? Anyways, he asks, how can we make the audience feel our emotions when we play? How do we communicate that?
Oh, first of all, are you Greek?
Yeah, hello.
Hi. Are you in Greece right now, or?
Yeah, I just talked with FTHIA, Arcodis.
Oh,
he
great.
gave me the link.
Beautiful. Say hello to FTHIA. We all love and miss her greatly. So I love your question. It's a beautiful question. So I think let's answer that by kind of opening it up for fun. How about if 3 people offer up what they think the answer to the question was? Maybe like 1 or 2 things. Go ahead and read it one more time, Dustin, and maybe raise your hand if you're willing to contribute for discussion.
So the question is, how do we make the audience feel our emotions when we perform?
Okay, so let me see 3 hands go up. Or I'll pick on you. Katie has a hand up. Tina, I'm gonna pick on Tina. And 1 other person? Sammy. Okay, let's start with Katie, since you actually raised your hand first.
So my idea was just come up with the emotions for yourself, and then like create a story in your mind for whatever you're playing, and then it's a lot easier to convey that if you believe it and you know it already, because I think other people will pick up on that.
Great. So I'll add to that you can feel a way about a piece like the Enigma variations, the Nimrod variation. Does anyone know that? Oh my gosh, like that's killer beautiful. And I've performed it with orchestra a few times, and I remember just the difference between like feeling it and hearing it and then being on stage and actually performing it. And I would say that I wasn't feeling that emotion while I was performing because I was focused on intonation and like lining up and all this other stuff. And I remember being struck by that. Like, I love this movement. Why am I not just, like lost in like the emotion of it? So I would say, to follow up with what Katie said, first define what the character and emotion of the piece is, and then define like what communicates that. And then practice that. And regardless of where you are in the moment of performance, you're going to want to be doing that thing. So where we tend to not think about aspects of what we should practice is mostly the visual component. We'll think about playing quietly or playing with bigger vibrato or playing, moving the phrase a certain way. But actually, I think the visual component is huge. Even if you're in an orchestra in a section, just how the flutist looks when they're playing their solo, how you look, what are your eyes doing, how are you set up on the stage, how are you moving, that can communicate emotion a lot. Okay, and then Tina, what are your thoughts on the question?
I agree with Katie and with you, Nina. I would maybe just add that it's good to go from your own experience, I don't know, in life, or I don't know, when you were younger, or maybe just find something that you really connect with. I don't know, maybe if you want to, I don't know, play something that is very energized, you can try to find an idea, I don't know, with one argument with a sister or siblings, or just something that it's really that you know what you're talking about, and just to be like really sincere and honest when you play the music. I think that's the it's like with emotions. I don't know, maybe just for me.
It's funny, I was just remembering this time when I was working on Daphnis with Peter Lloyd, who was the principal flutist of the London Symphony, and he was my teacher. And I was 19. And I remember him saying, when you've had a little more experience in life and you've had a few heartbreaks and romances that have not worked out, you'll be able to play this Daphnis so much better. And I was just like a happy flute player wanting to play Daphnis. But I love what Tina said. And I think also what you said, Katie, if you create a storyline or you have something that you can go back to in your heart and experience, you know, that's why all these life experiences are so key for our artwork, because that's what comes through in the way we communicate and in the integrity of the experience. So even if you're just going back to an argument with your siblings, like Tina said, or what it felt like when you first learned how to ride a bike, that's powerful. And when you're teaching, you want to do that too. You want to bring your students into a realm that they're familiar with so they can access that right away. So if they play soccer, you want to be like, I want you to feel this and play this like you just scored a goal. Or, you know, whatever it might be, ice skating or other instruments they might play. So who was the other person I said? Oh, Sammy, right? Okay.
So one thing for me that really helps and that I found that helps with my students is singing. And if you can sing something, even if it's not the right pitches and even if your own intonation is off, if you can sing the line, you're more likely to play it because then you're embodying the sound. And so that's one way that I found to be most effective.
Yeah, I love that. So, and riding along with that is adding text to whatever you're doing. So let's say you're, let me think for a second. Let's say you're doing the opening of Fawn. Dee da dee da da da. If you just add text like, do you know what I have to say? Whatever it might be, like just the idea is that if there's something to communicate and you're connected to the essence of communication, and on top of it, you're integrated and connected to the source of a deeper profoundness of what is in the music, then you've got it. So piggybacking on what everybody else has said, Pitas, in terms of your question, I would also say that as a performer, it's really powerful when you speak to your audience. It takes so much courage. I remember when I began to speak, I was not trained to speak by any of my teachers. Nobody I went to school with spoke. We all did that thing, you know, where you wear black or maybe you have a puffy dress and you walk out on stage and you take your bow and you play and you walk off between every single piece. You walk back, you know, that whole thing. Like that's how I was trained, and everybody around me was doing that. And it was in the 90s, it's right after my daughter was born. So it would have been like in 1994, I gave my first concert where I spoke. And I remember being so nervous. I had note cards. I mean, like, I don't do note cards, you know, and I had like note cards and I was like talking about each piece. And, but I was committed to that because I had seen someone do it. And I was like, that's really powerful. And so that's a thing to develop. And I would say, even back to Juan's question about like, when you go to perform for your college teaching job, probably the people who are on stage also trying to get that job won't speak unless this is something they've developed. And if you're on stage and you're speaking to that committee and you're talking about your music, that's powerful. So communicating with the audience, not just through your flute, with your eyes, between pieces, letting them know you appreciate them. And that you are sharing something deep and intimate with them in order to change their lives. And I would also say setting an intention like that is extremely powerful, because if that is your intention, you will achieve it. If you spend the day of your recital or the week or the month before, or anytime you're practicing a piece and you're like, I'm giving myself and my time over to developing this because I hope to touch someone's life and make an experience for them. And that will come through, and it's really powerful. Okay, Dustin, more questions.
Yeah, so we have another question from Sammy, and she
Thank
asks,
you.
Karakalo.
Okay, great. Sammy asks, how do you recommend to find a balance when recovering from an injury and not feel like you're falling behind too much?
Okay, that's such a good question. I had never experienced an injury up until I think maybe it was 4 years ago, which is pretty remarkable, especially given all the practicing I'd done earlier in my life. And it was devastating for me because the hardest thing about it, and the injury was an embouchure, it was related to me switching to a really heavy flute after being on a flute that was so light. And so I developed I self-diagnosed myself, but like some kind of embouchure fatigue syndrome. And then like I developed like confusion in my brain because like I was navigating through, I think I bought 6 flutes in 1 year. I mean, it was really hard. And so the hardest thing for me was that there was nothing I could do. Like if someone had said to me, go out and walk across America and this injury will go away, I would have been like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go do that. But I could do nothing. And that was really hard. So it's a great question, Sammy, because, when you have an injury, it's not just physiological. It can be spiritual, emotional, neurological. And when I say spiritual, I mean even like just on the flute spiritual realm, like, we love our flutes. We've invested so much into them. We come into an injury and suddenly our voice is gone. Like in my case, my voice was gone. I felt like my heart and soul were like gone. And so one thing I recommend is thinking about it in terms of columns. So you've got the physiological aspect of the injury, you have the emotional aspect, which could be that you're devastated or you're stressed out and you have anxiety, whatever it is. You have the spiritual component, has something broken in you because of it, like are you in pain? And the neurological, psychological component, like, oh my gosh, is my career going to go out the window? Like, am I going to pass my DMA hearing because of this injury, whatever it might be. And to then watch the progress develop, because everything will get better if you do the things you're supposed to do, which in many cases is just not do something, and be aware that there are those other components. But I'm going to ask you to follow up a little bit more on that question, Sammy, so go for it.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think the one thing I'm struggling with, so I'm battling an injury right now, and the one thing I'm struggling with is I know that I need to rest, because the more that I practice, the further I'm injuring myself. And so I've been doing a lot of mental practice, and I have a dowel that I've been working on with my dexterity. But I still feel like when I do have the time to put my flute on my face and put my flute together and actually play, I still feel like I'm not progressing in a way that I want to, considering my timeline with school and studies.
Right. That's how the psychological piece comes in. So, okay. So bottom line is, ready for these profound 2 words, let go. Oh my gosh. Letting go is so hard. And I remember with my injury feeling like I had this thing in my hands and there was nothing I could do with it. I couldn't hold it. I couldn't throw it away. It was just there. And all I could do was like sit with its presence, and it was painful. So in our case, and we talked about this last week, Sammy, the first thing to do is see what you can get out of. I think part of letting go is like letting go of our ideas, of our timeline. For those of you in undergraduate programs, like maybe that means an extra semester. maybe it means you take a semester off. Maybe you do that thing called the gap year that like is supposed to be this awful thing that you don't want to ever admit to, this gap year. But oh my gosh, gap years, what a beautiful thing. Time off from like killing, oh, I see hearts going up, you know, taking time off from like being on the treadmill or in the little hamster wheel. Why not? So I think you need to just, in those times, reevaluate all components and aspects. Get 3 people who are on your team who are going to help ask you hard questions, and just kind of like shift the way you see everything and start to put things away. Okay, I'm going to add time. I'm not going to play this piece. I'm going to change the date on this. I'm going to let everybody know that I just can't do it. And that really opens up opportunity. Okay, Dustin, more questions.
Yeah, something a little more fun. Carissa asked, what is your favorite venue that you've played in and why?
Oh, thank you, Carissa. Okay, I don't know if this is my favorite venue. Well, Carnegie Hall, the Carnegie Hall thing was really an amazing experience because that was incredible. But I have to share this story, and it's a good one to share now. So when I was living in Germany, I performed for this organization called Live Music Now. And our job was to bring music to underserved communities before that was a buzzword. Like there was actually a time where that wasn't a buzzword. Underserved communities is like a thing now, and bringing music and art to underserved communities is big, but this was the first ever of any of that. And so I worked with a harpist. We had a duo, and we played at refugee camps. We played in a hospice in a room where like everybody was hooked up to machines, and the nurses were walking around with radiation, like light beeping things to make sure they weren't getting radiated. And these people were like comatose. We played in, I mean, it was prisons. I've done a lot of work in prisons. I don't think I've shared that much with our studio, but I've spent a lot of time actually performing in prisons, and not even just as part of that, but later in my career, I started something in my last studio at Bowling Green. I got them to perform in prisons too, and that is really, really powerful. Walking into a prison where every single doorknob won't twist unless there's a loud beeping sound that allows you through that door, and then seeing all those prisoners file in and sit down to hear live music. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes as I talk about it now. So I think, to answer your question, Carissa, truly the most powerful performing experiences in my life have been the ones like that. And it's really taught me that, like, if you can open your heart up and perform, let's say Mozart, in a prison, and you see people responding, and then you go into, say, Carnegie Hall or some other big, great hall, you know, that has like prestige, and you realize it's still the same people. It's just still hearts and souls that like need to be touched. It changes the way you perform, and you are very empowered. So I don't know. I was really happy to share that experience, but yeah, there's a lot there. So I would say prisons and refugee camps and hospice centers. Okay, Dustin.
A lot. I think we've covered most of them. We have some earlier questions. I think also from Carissa asked about how you view your students of various ages. That kind of went along with a private studio question. Let me see.
So Carissa, can you follow up a little bit more on like what aspect of that question you would love to hear me speak about?
Yeah, so when I was a TA at Bowling Green, they really stressed not to have like any type of relationship with your students. And it was interesting because I ended up finding myself in social places with some of my students because I was also a student. So those lines kind of crossed, and I was just wondering if you actively think about that with your students and if it's determined by age.
So I would say it's not, so first of all, to answer your question, the first word that comes to my mind is boundaries. Professional boundaries. You know, some people use the term psychic distance. I don't know if you've heard that. I don't really like it. It's kind of a cold term. But, you know, and I used to teach at Bowling Green, and I remember the dean at the time, who wasn't there when you were there, used to talk about keeping psychic distance with the students. So you're probably like coming in on the tail end of that teaching when you were a grad student there, and I was the flute professor before you got there. So it's interesting. I think there's probably a lineage of that. But in general, every, you know, every profession has its culture. And it's important to know what the culture of your profession is and the subculture of your profession. So, and we talk about this all the time when we think of how to touch each other as musicians, because a dancer pre-COVID, this is of course, you know, might be easily always moving. A dance professor might be actually manipulating the student's body, you know, getting into the space with them. An actor might do the same thing. You know, does a pianist need to do that? Does a biology professor need to do that? Probably not, you know? So it's about understanding your culture, your subculture, knowing what the professional expectations are, being able to set boundaries, understanding voice, your voice, you know, what is the, how are you going to design yourself, not only on social media in terms of your branding, but how are you going to design your brand and yourself as you present yourself professionally to your students, to people you don't know in the profession, to people you do know. It's all related. And then executing that and walking the walk, walking the path, and changing as you go. So I would say it's not really for me so much about age or, you know, whatever it might be that you mentioned more specifically. It's more just about like understanding the culture, understanding where I want to be in the culture. You know, do I want to use swear words when I teach? I don't. Might I use them with my kids for fun? I might, you know. And then just kind of designing how you're going to show up and showing up. There's also another question in here about hybrid arts, which we might have time for. So I'll do this. At what point in your career did you realize you had a love for hybrid arts? Well, now, I didn't even know what that was. Like, I think actually hybrid arts is kind of a phrase that I and Hillary mostly have come up with at this point. I mean, hybrid arts, there's arts integration has been around for a while, you know, but this concept of like being a hybrid artist is really it's a new phrase. It wasn't around in the 90s or even in the early 2000s or mid 2000s that I know of. And I would say the first experience I had was working with some dancers. And once I had that experience, I was like, wow, why would I ever not want to do this again? Because I learned so much as a flutist, hearing them talk about language, how they handled time, how they moved around the room. And from that moment on, and that was about 12 years ago, I've just kept pushing through. And now, as you all know, I'm into this underwater stuff. So, so I'd say about 12 years ago, and my love for it keeps growing because it's really, again, back to the seed. It's about creating, it's about pursuing things that are challenging, and it's about touching lives. So, okay, we have time for maybe one more question, something that maybe has not been typed. I see a hand. Jacob.
Kind of relating to that, I had asked a question in the chat regarding crafting the program for the hybrid arts events kind of thing. So like speaking on your experience with formulating the idea behind hydrology and the other hybrid arts projects that you've created.
Yeah, so I think what's really successful is mixing as much as possible in the visual, the theatrical, and then kind of keeping in mind your audience. So and your location for performance. You know, so if you're doing a kids concert, for example, oh, that's so much fun. I've done kids concerts with puppets. It's so much fun. Like, you can have the puppet talking to you while you're playing Mary Had a Little Lamb, you know, like, I mean, you know, so thinking about like what impact you want to have, and in terms of your audience, how you want to touch them, or what kind of experience and points of entry that you want to give for them. Is your goal to help them understand classical music better? If so, then you're going to have Bach and Mozart maybe on your, and when I say classical, I mean Western art music, you know, pre-1945. And if so, then how are you going to integrate speaking? Are you going to throw poetry in there? Well, you have an actor walk out on stage and like pick up some of the, you know, work. Will you have dancers dance? Will you show video? But I think the more multi-sensory the experience, the better. And maybe you have palate cleansers. Maybe you do a recital where you only have 4 or 5 things like that, or maybe you have only 1. But everything surrounding it is related in some way. And that bottom line relationship could simply be versatility is the new virtuosity, just showing that you as an artist have this ability to create spectrum. And talking between pieces, again, I think is something that's really important. So we're officially out of time. Thank you for your great questions. I'll hang out in the room for like 5 more minutes if you're one of those people that didn't want to like ask a question out loud, or you want to hear more of. Otherwise, goodbye everybody, and hang out for 5 more minutes if you want to.